All right. If I did things correctly, this is Mike the Cop, and I am live on the YouTubes. I am here. Interesting little show today. Have you guys ever had one of those days where everything sucks that you're trying to do? Everything that you try to do. And I had this fight with the UPP, the underpaid producer. He was like, you'll never be able to live stream without me because of the way that I have things set up. It's going to be too complicated. And I said, well, watch me, tune in, and you'll see me live. And this is my level of determination. Here I am live, okay? Ready to rock. It's not what I wanted it to be. I'm in the unpaid intern's bedroom. That's not a Trump hat. That's a make fishing great again, just in case people are thinking I'm biased for Trump. Not that it matters anyway. This is a code violation, but it's a boys' room, basketball net, baseball hat, that kind of a thing. So I'm solo. No underpaid producer. The unpaid intern actually came to the rescue today to make this possible with running out and getting a cable for me to add a monitor on so I could actually bring my guest on today. A couple of quick house cleaning items in the news by way of opening up the show. In the news, Stormy Daniels was arrested. Columbus police picked her up at a strip club. I don't know. Apparently, she got upset that someone touched her boobs at a strip club. I mean, I guess you're not supposed to do that. Fun fact: I have had to go into a strip club for work, but I've actually never been to one as a patron, and I never intend to. I'm a big believer in not paying for things that you can get for free. Anyway, so basically, Stormy Daniels got arrested for being Stormy Daniels. I mean, if that's your lifestyle, then expect that it's going to come back to haunt you, I guess. I don't know. So that's a notable arrest. And then also in the news, this potential crime that it's been everywhere is George Lopez peeing on Donald Trump's Hollywood star. I looked into it. It wasn't actual urine. He had a water bottle. They blurred it out on purpose. He made it look like he was peeing on it, which doesn't make it any better per se, but it doesn't make it a crime. It's not a crime to put water on the ground, I don't think. But who knows in Hollywood? But it still goes to show, I mean, just the lack of respect for the office that exists. I can't imagine if someone would have fake peed on some place in the country where Obama had been or something like that. I don't know. Just crazy to me. It's crazy double standard. It's dumb. I think that you should respect the office of the president no matter who the president is. You don't have to respect that person. But thank you. I appreciate that, conservative Russian. It's going to be difficult. Thank you. The super chat is up. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it. I will come back to super chats at the end. I do have a guest on that we're going to talk about, and I'll answer some questions at the end because I don't know how long he's going to have. The George Lopez thing, it is what it is. People were thinking, A, he was exposing himself in public, and B, urinating in public, both of which would be misdemeanor crimes in California and in Michigan, if it mattered, if George Lopez was doing that in Michigan somewhere. Maybe it's an attempt to him to stay relevant. I don't know what it is. It's sort of dumb, a little bit disrespectful, and pointless, other than just getting attention. It seems to me like a stunt at staying relevant. And he is somebody who says we should deport the police, right? You remember that old meme? And he's really weak-minded because he disables the comments. So he does a stunt like that, and then he disables the comments so that people can't actually criticize him for it. So he doesn't he's not a real objective person. He's not willing to speak usually publicly with people who disagree with him. So it would seem. But speaking of abolishing the police, there's been this whole big debacle going around, like abolish ICE. So I figured who better to bring on than John Burke, who has been a combat veteran on, is it American Grit or True Grit? I can't remember. I'll find out right now. Let's talk to John real quick. Yo. Are we back? Maybe. Maybe not. I don't have him yet. See if he calls back in. A little bit of a delay, it seems like. Just waiting on him. There was some confusion as to the time today, and that's on me. I forget that there's time change differences, so it's a terrible habit, self-admitted terrible habit of me giving a time for something and not thinking about the fact other people have different time zones. Yo!
Hey, you got me?
I got you.
Awesome.
I woke up in a cold sweat this morning thinking about that time that I humped your leg at Police Week, and it was pretty exciting. I don't know if it was as special to you as it was to me, but
It happens all the time, unfortunately. It just becomes common to me. It just is what it is, you know. I apologize for had to pull over and get this thing set up real quick.
Noise.
All right, hopefully you can see me better here. All right, there we go.
I can see you.
I can't see you.
Yeah, it won't. I have like a $40 webcam instead of my like $1,000 camcorder because I had to come home and basically, you remember the movie Apollo 13? Essentially, I have traveled to the moon and back trying to technologically make this make sense.
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, it's not been very easy to make this happen. So,
Well, I'm proud of you, man. I'm proud that you're doing this. You're doing amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate you humoring me in saying that. But
Absolutely.
I don't know where you were on the 4th of July. I was drinking alcohol and celebrating America and our independence and our freedom, and then some breaking news happens at the family festivities showing some moron climbing the Statue of Liberty and and the whole idea is abolish ICE. I mentioned George Lopez earlier because that guy said we should deport the police before, so it was a good transition into abolishing ICE. And so I figured let's talk about that, man. What's your thoughts on abolishing the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement as an agency in its entirety?
No and yes.
I'm the same way. I feel the exact same way. So I'm curious if our yeses and nos align or not.
Okay. Well, first, thank you for having me on the show here. I appreciate it, man. It's always good to discuss these things with other intellectuals out there that are open-minded, free-thinking, yet still critical thinkers that look at every single issue, and rather than align ourselves with how the party thinks, we instead approach it from a common sense point of view. And regardless of what the party views on it, I think that we have to look at every single instance with a common sense approach. And I think ultimately, as long as we identify and align ourselves with the Constitution, we can't go wrong, because it's basically what this country was founded upon. I'm trying to get to where my camera isn't got me whited out pretty hard.
That's all right.
It's hard. Okay,
that's racist, but that's okay.
Yeah, I apologize. You'll get over it. It is what it is. For the deportation of police. There you go. So perfect. Okay. The abolishment of ICE, when we start off this conversation with anybody out there, especially conservatives, the Democrats have already spun this in a way to where when you hear the word abolish, we're thinking of what they've associated with as far as calling ICE and a terrorist organization, which any Democrat out there that uses it in that context clearly doesn't know what a terrorist organization is or what terrorism is actually boiled down to in the root of enforcing a political or religious ideology through the means of violence. That's not what ICE is for. ICE is actually unconstitutionally founded back a while. I think it was 13 years old, I believe.
Something
which
like
was
that.
Unconstitutionally done because essentially it's federal involvement in state issues. Now, when I say I'm for the abolishment of ICE, it's not the abolishment of ICE. It's the handing over of reins from the federal to the state level and allow state-run agencies to police their own.
Yes.
So if we want to have in Texas an ICE agency and rename it to whatever we want, I am for that.
Yeah.
I used to be for ICE, until I sat down with Officer Peterson, who's a congressional candidate out of Missouri, who's running, and he explained it to me, and it made perfect sense because he even said the same thing. He's like, I like my ice, or I like my whiskey like I like my freedom, no ice. I was like, well, wait a minute. I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. And so we sat down, I had him on the podcast, and he explained to me, and he made me understand, like, that makes sense. He even went so far as to say he's for the abolishment of TSA. I was like, wait a minute. He's like, no, that's the government's, or that's not the government's, but that is the individual state or business's responsibility. So, if, say, like, we had an airport that had security or lack thereof, who are you going to use to travel? Like, well, clearly the airport that does security. That's their right to do so. It's like it shouldn't involve federal agencies. Like, but I am for the enforcement of immigration policies at the state level. Because law is law. And so the federal government, their only responsibility in regards to immigration is the naturalization of a citizen. That's it. They are not for the enforcement of border patrol or border enforcement. We have a job for that, created for that at the state-run level. So if, say, for example, Texas wants to vote in through the legislative process of creating a border wall, that's Texas's right to do so. And if California doesn't, that's their right as a state to do so. But the citizens of that state have the ability to vote into office, vote into power through the democratic process of who they feel best represents the will of the majority, which is what America is founded upon. We are a republic, and that's why I feel that we've gotten away from to where we put more power in the federal government. And clearly the federal government has dropped the ball on many issues out there. But to go back to your main point or main question, I am not for the abolishment of ICE. I am for, again, decentralizing it down to the state level and let state, as a centralized agency, run ICE. If they choose to call it ICE, if they choose to rename it to whatever, you know, I'm for that. I think that's a state's rights to do so. And I don't sit there and think that, say like we had a Democratic run government right now, and they said we are not for the enforcement of immigration policy. Well, then Texas has already got an issue that isn't felt up in Wisconsin, but it's felt here in Texas. Because, you know, we have such a strong level of mass illegal immigration pushing through our borders. A lot of them don't make it up that far. A southern state's affected. So if I sit there and I say that a Democratic-controlled Congress, a Democratic president, said that you as Texas are not allowed to enforce border policies that Texas has, I think the federal government needs to keep its nose out of the state-ran business.
Gotcha. So how would you see, would you feel the same way about Border Patrol then as the federal responsibility to have agents at the border, whether it's, you know, checking IDs or doing investigations, narcotics, law enforcement, essentially, along the border? Do you apply how do you apply the same reasoning to that agency or any federal law enforcement agency essentially protecting the borders from illegal immigrants?
Well, is it a federal border or a state border?
I might argue that they should all be state borders. I'm not sure that I want that government interference. I'm almost afraid anymore to even say that I'm a conservative, just because so many terms anymore come with so much baggage that I wish it just didn't have. But unfortunately, words are what they are, and the way that it's conveyed and what it means to people when they hear it, it varies. So some people, when I say I'm conservative, may automatically think alt-right. Some people may think something else. You know, who knows? The conservatism of Ronald Reagan is very different than the conservatism of a Rand Paul. So I just say I'm an independent thinker. So where I think we probably agree is I don't have a problem finding and removing people who have come to this country illegally. In fact, I would highly encourage it. In fact, I think we should up our efforts. However,
I agree.
I do think that it should be decentralized in some way, whether there would be some type of hybrid idea where maybe the agency is what connects it. I see it. One disconnect for me in my head is because of the nature of what ICE does, like, say, for example, beyond just immigration enforcement is the trafficking of human trafficking. So if they're trying to track that, then the ability for states to communicate with one another and actually coordinate the efforts of ending lines of human trafficking or processes of that. I could see I could see that being complex, and I could see the advantage of having some type of a federal ability to connect those agencies that want to work through like a pipeline. But I don't know that it needs to be an entire agency. I think maybe the federal government helps only in as much as it makes communication between those agencies and coordination between them that much easier. But I think
what examples can we give in regards to federal agencies helping other state-run agencies communicate amongst themselves? When we saw for 9/11, or we saw back during Pearl Harbor, where agencies weren't talking, they still don't talk. There's a lot of miscommunication. There's a lot of information held back. I think that basically every state has the ability to fend for itself to an extent. And, you know, I talked about this in depth with a friend of mine yesterday who's also a police officer here in Dallas. And we talked about, like, say, for example, the legalization of marijuana, how it should not be it boiled down to I am for the legalization of it, because if we want to look at this, it's a foreign substance that we put in our body for mind-altering effects. Well, we have the same thing with alcohol.
Yeah.
But his argument was that it comes with a sincere violent or a heavy violent background, like, well, during Prohibition times it did as well. But through generations... Exactly. Through generations, it was normalized, and the violent nature ceased to exist. I don't see people getting into turf wars over alcohol. But it goes back down to, I think, the idea of what is the federal government's job and roles and responsibility in the ongoing day-to-day operations of America. And I think that we've stripped away so much power from state and gave it to the feds. And we've seen through the Trump administration, during the attacks on Trump by the FBI, FBI agents, of different things. We saw the breakdown of the FBI at the Parkland shooting, that the FBI was so busy investigating Trump for these false allegations that they let slip through their hands a man that sent up like 32 red flags, even to the local level of the sheriff's department. Yeah. So, and again, that's also another great example of why you don't trust federal agencies. You don't trust state-run agencies. You hope they do their job, but the only person that I, as an American citizen, trust is myself. And that's why I have that Second Amendment right to not only to protect myself, but also protect myself, against a potential tyrannical government, be it at state or federal level.
Yeah.
But it all boils down to the fact of, I think that we have gotten away from what the Constitution dictates in regards to, this is what the forefathers were about. It was they were not for big government. It is not government's job to get involved in many of the things that we have allowed it. I think the Supreme Court has got way too much power.
Yeah.
Way too much power. I think that if people vote with their wallets and their feet, and California wants to legalize abortion, even though I am morally against it, that's California's right as a state. If Texas is against it, and the majority of Texans feel that this is wrong, it's well within our right as Texans to vote this out and say, no, it is not legal here, through the whole democratic process. But people don't like that. They feel that whatever's trending, whatever the new narrative is that the progressives have dictated to us, whatever our selective moral outrage has to be about, and right now it's over illegal immigration, which they are so misinformed on this, because if we want to look at illegal immigration and the separation of children from parents, we are unable to identify if that child belongs to that parent or not. So if that's a sex trafficker and we're putting the child back with the parent, the supposed parent, it's like taking a burn victim and throwing them back into the damn fire. So these are issues that Democrats don't delve into, nor ask the opinions of people who are actually doing this, saying, that's why I disagree with Trump on signing the executive order of putting them back together. It's like, we don't know. You don't know if these parents, the White House even said 14,000 came over, 12,000 weren't even their parents. Like, well, then why are they bringing them over? Well, drug mules, sex trafficking, you just don't know.
Oh, yeah.
So it's all emotional
sex trafficking, narcotics, and then just the sympathy card. They're simply exploiting children in an attempt to get into the country, because we have for over a decade now simply said if children are involved, then you kind of get this free pass. And so, of course, you've got families from Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, all these other impoverished countries that are coming up. They live in Mexico for a little bit. They stage themselves, and then they cross over. And the parents of those kids, they haven't even seen their own parents in 2 years because they moved to Mexico with some other random dude that was just taking kids to try to get into the States. So we don't know the backstory. We don't know the impact of the risk that we're taking by allowing them into the country, and certainly by trying to vet them on some level. It's actually the inverse of what people are thinking it is, separating families. It's actually a possible benefit to the families by actually returning their children. You know, we're talking about a world that people just don't understand. They don't comprehend what life is like in these other countries and what they're willing to do, and how criminal activity is involved in the process of trying to get to the country.
So everything you just said, and I want you to go back in time with me real quick for maybe about a year and a half ago. There was huge moral outrage over this issue that we called the Muslim ban. And if we look at why we had that into effect, and we look at the illegal immigration issue we're facing at the southern borders of Texas, it's literally the same thing.
Yeah.
You cannot vet these people coming from these countries because that country's government has no really good way of vetting felons from crossing over and coming to America. So America's saying, I'm not going, if we can't figure out who you are through a database of your country and your country lacks that database, you're not coming to America. And it's the same issue we're seeing right now on the southern border. So these Democrats out there are using this emotional, you know, we have to feel bad. Did you feel bad after 9/11? Yes, you did. Would you feel bad for those terrorists if they were strung up by the necks? Well, Democrats probably would. Oh, that's just inhumane, even though they murdered almost 3,000 American civilians. So this emotional thing it's essentially limiting their ability to think logically. And even any leader in a role, whether you be in the police force or the military, you cannot think by emotion. You've got to think by strategy. You've got to think by logic. And the moment you go into an emotional way of thinking, you're going to make a mistake and you're going to get somebody killed. You're going to fall into a trap. You can do something dumb. But again, these points are made countless times. Democrats don't want to listen. They want to continuously use this emotion card of, you know, we should feel bad for the kids. We do feel bad for the kids. I want that kid with his parents. I don't want that kid being trafficked over. We talked about females that are coming over through this process. 73% have been victims of some type of sexual crime going through the illegal crossing of the border. Yeah. So if feminist Democrats are all for women's rights, if these feminists out there that are marching through the streets with their vagina hats, their boobs hanging out, and wearing these vagina outfits, if you're truly against misogynistic beliefs or misogynistic practices of Americans, not to mention the culture that comes over from Mexico, then you would sit there and you should put an end to the very same thing that's causing these women to get raped. But they don't want to do it because, again, it's this empathy card of, you know, they should be allowed into America. It's not your right to come to America. It's a benefit. It's a privilege to come here, to immigrate here. And people don't realize that conservatives, or I think more of myself as a libertarian, are not for, or we're not against legal immigration. I'm for it. I believe that there's a reason you want to come here from another country. But I do not believe in multiculturalism because I'm not going to sit here and embrace a culture of Islam that condones the throwing of homosexuals off buildings. I'm not going to condone the cultural behavior of a 47-year-old Mexican man having sex with a 13-year-old Mexican child and having a daughter, and then leaving him at the doorstep, or leaving them at the doorstep because he don't want the drama. Right. This is a culture that is embraced down there.
You know, you bring up a really good point, and specifically when you said something about Islam and the way that they treat homosexuals in countries where they enforce strict Islamic law, Sharia law, how they're treated. The correlation to me as it comes with illegal immigration is the constant pushback from what I just would call like the far left. I mean, I have some friends who would call themselves liberal, but again, these words don't mean much anymore because they're really more independent thinkers that differ on a few issues than me. But they're not far to the left really when they call themselves liberals. But the pushback is often like they don't understand that you don't have to make everything mutually exclusive. So in other words, just because I don't want people to come here illegally doesn't mean I can't have compassion on those in situations that are tragic or difficult in other places. So you don't have to give up one to hold to the other. You can have both things being true at the same time. So I fiercely oppose anyone coming here illegally because it's a slap in the face of everyone who has sacrificed so much to come here the right way. It's a slap in the face of people like you who have served in the armed forces that have protected the freedoms and stand up for the Constitution and have tried to fight for a nation of law that it means something to come here the right way. And I reject the notion that we should call it anything other than illegal. This undocumented nonsense is, it's like, it's like calling a pedophile a misunderstood lover. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You can change the name all you want. Now there's this movement of they're calling themselves MAPS, minority attracted persons, and trying to jump into the LGBT community. And it's like, you want to map my kid? I'm gonna slit your face. This is the options. But I don't want to get too far off topic.
But if they're born, the argument that makes those, if they're born that way, don't we have to accept them? Well, at what point do we draw a line in what is considered to be immoral and illogical in the realm of sexuality? We have 72 made-up genders now, but now if we go by this where they're born this way, okay, so then if somebody is a sexual predator that is attracted to children, you have to accept them.
Right.
I mean,
that's how they identify.
Exactly, but going back to your other point though, in regards, I'm trying to figure out a good spot for this camera. Here we go. In regards to how much I feel for these people going through these issues at the southern border, or people that are dealing with their issues in these foreign countries that are essentially shithole countries, I would be lying if I said I even cared. I don't care. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to have some type of feigned amount of just moral outrage or feigned amount of empathy, because I don't. I've been there, and it's what makes me so grateful to have been born in America. But when people say they do care, it's like, okay, well, there's two levels of care. There's passive and there's active. So if I sit there and I say I passively care, that doesn't do anything. It just basically gives us this feeling of moral superiority, or it gives us this touchy feel-good feeling of I'm a good human being because I say that I care. In reality, I'd say a good majority of us honestly don't give a shit.
Right. Because changing your profile picture on Facebook or making a status doesn't accomplish anything. Certainly.
Or doing 22 push-ups to curb veteran suicide doesn't do a damn thing. But we check the block, we put the yellow bumper sticker on our bumper sticker by saying we support the troops, and that's the extent of it.
The one meme, like, look at me, I'm helping. Like, you just, like,
exactly.
So when it comes to these people screaming abolish ICE, they're not, what are they really doing? They're not doing anything.
These are the symptoms of anarchists, of community policing, and I'm sure you of all people can appreciate this. Community policing already exists by community, to those of the community that join the police force to police the community.
Right.
But they want this idea that each community can enforce its own laws at like the town level, which at that point you're going to have like Mad Max with the open deserts of just craziness. It doesn't work. We have these laws set into a place, which is federal. It's a three-part government's job to do this. But these people out there that are saying these things as abolish ICE, they're doing it like we talked about before, because they view ICE as a terrorist organization. It's like you couldn't be far off. They're enforcing laws, albeit to the federal levels, which should be at state levels, that are already enacted that you just don't like. You cannot have open borders. Name me one country that has open borders.
Right. Exactly.
But America suddenly should. America suddenly should, because Trump calls these countries shitholes, and it's like, well, they're not shitholes. Then why are they leaving them?
Right. Exactly. What I don't understand is if these other places are so amazing, why aren't you leaving there? Why isn't George Lopez going to Mexico like he promised? Why isn't somebody else moving to Canada like they said? Like, it's all like no one is actually doing anything to make a difference. Like, I think I have some semblance of this idea when. Like, for me, my church, like, when I give money to my church, they have teams that go to this. We basically adopted a village in Guatemala that didn't have clean water. So we go back like once or twice a year with an organization, and so we put a well there. Then we built a school there. Then we did this. It's an example. Instead of saying like we can't solve everything, just changing my profile picture on Facebook does nothing. But through my local community, I can say like I can demonstrate I can literally show my care and compassion in some way out there. It can be done, but it doesn't have to be. Just because I'm doing that doesn't mean, well, if they showed up at my doorstep, then I would have to let them into my house.
Right.
And that I would also hazard to say that most people crying about illegal immigration and saying we should just let everybody in, open borders, would feel very differently if they decided to have like 4 people just knock on their door and be like, "Hola, señor, necesita un place to live." Like, I mean, you're not going to let them in. Then you need to feed them. You need to buy them a car. You need to take care of them because, hey, you're supposed to have compassion. And that's where the breakdown is demonstrated between you don't have to make me choose compassion or the law. They can both stand on their own.
It's another thing that many Democrats are not realizing, that if somebody comes over here illegally, they're an undocumented illegal alien. And another company, I saw this when I used to work road construction here in Texas, and Texas has some very brutal heat. It gets up to 100, 110 during the summer, and then you're working on an asphalt highway. We had a lot of illegal immigrants from Mexico coming over. And you know what they got paid? $5 an hour to do the hardest work out there. Mm-hmm. And they were put in the most unsafe of conditions possible. But you know why they couldn't complain? What would happen to them if they complained?
Exactly.
And so if Democrats truly care about human rights, the rights of illegal immigrants versus legal immigrants, and you realize these people are being essentially given lower, like cut in half minimum wage and put in the most horrendous working conditions imaginable, living in substandard conditions here in America, all because they're illegal and their employers know this, and they use that over and they hold it over their head. If you truly care about them, you would try and go after these companies hiring them and fine them so heavily that they have to pay them, or you don't hire them. So Austin Peterson, again, very brilliant mind. He's actually, libertarian. He's against the wall. And I was like, why are you against the wall? I was like, I know a lot of people aren't for the wall, especially conservatives. A lot of people it's hit or miss with them. He said, we are looking at this all wrong. We have to attack this economically. It's like, you can build a wall all you want. They're going to figure out a way to get over. I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, if we sit there and we build this wall, there will be tunnels. There's going to be, people are ingenuitive. They'll find one way, shape, or form to get over. I was like, true. It's like, now, if we attack this economically and we start finding these companies that are hiring illegals to the point where it potentially could put them out of business, are they going to find work? Like, probably not. I was like, what if we start stripping away the ability, like in California, as an illegal, you can get a driver's license, and they're still going to get insurance. They're not going to get insurance. So if you start stripping away these rights, and here's where we talk about states' rights versus federal. If Texas passes a series of laws and says that, you cannot get a driver's license as an illegal without proof of documentation, proof of birth, proof of country of origin, you cannot get a driver's license, you cannot get car insurance, you cannot get health insurance, you can't get anything. What's it going to do? Now, we boil this down to the state level. If Texas enacts these laws, but California doesn't, where are these illegals going to go?
Yep.
California. And what's California going to start having a huge influx of and having to deal with? A lot of illegal immigrants going over there and weighing down that system.
Yep.
Weighing down that system. And suddenly you're going to have California citizens saying, why are we getting hit so hard in taxes? Why are we getting hit hard with all of these issues we're dealing with?
Yeah.
You're going to see the prison systems fill up at a 10 times higher rate. And you're going to start seeing more illegals that are committing these crimes based upon their culture they grew up with, not being imprisoned, because you realize, like, hey, our prisons can't hold this many. Right now, we're spending $60,000 to $90,000 on any individual illegal immigrant that is imprisoned here in America. It should not be that way.
Yeah.
But the issue we're facing is we put them in prison, they do their time, they pay back their debt, they're given taxpayer dime to live off of, in a sense, while they're in prison, sent back to Mexico, and came right back. The Steinle issue, that guy was deported 5 times and murdered that woman.
Yep.
But the only way he was able to come back is through economically. He could come back, get a job, get a license, remove that, and you starve him to death. And I agree. It's how it should be.
Yeah,
and
there was
you attack it economically, put up the wall.
Someone mentioned in the comments here that their friend was killed. It says, I have 2 friends who were killed by a drunk driver, illegal alien in Waco. They left behind 3 kids, 5, 7, and 9. What about them? Only made the local news. This doesn't become a national talking point, but there was something that popped up nationwide. There was two law enforcement officers. I think they were federal. I could be wrong, but they were killed not in a law enforcement related incident. They stopped to help someone in an accident, and an illegal immigrant had hit them at the scene of the accident and kills them. And there was no intent to it, so I don't want to misrepresent it. But at the end of the day, right, he had a $280 fine, is what they ended up pleading it out to. Kills two people, and gets a fine, and is here illegally. And this is this is and people are like, well, that stuff's going to happen no matter what. Yeah, but
But it could have been prevented.
what is the punishment? It could have been prevented. What is the punishment? They didn't even get deported for their actions. So I remember
the insanity of it, man.
when I started as an officer. When we encountered an illegal immigrant, we would call Border Patrol. Obviously, like I worked in Metro Detroit, we had stations very close. They would come, they would pick them up, and they would process them out. And then there started policies to where literally we would call, they just wouldn't come out anymore because they said all we're going to do is write them a ticket, and they have a year to keep this ticket and come back to court. And guess what? They're not going to do. They're not going to come back to court. So basically, our hands became tied. So what do you do other than expend resources, law enforcement resources, to essentially keep people here illegally? And while I'm dealing with those illegal immigrants and their domestic situation or their whatever situation that has been caused by a violation of the law or a disturbance of the peace, I'm not keeping someone else's house safe. I'm not preventing by my even just presence in patrol. I'm not preventing another break-in from somewhere else, from people who are paying me with their property tax dollars.
Yep.
So
that's the insanity of it, man. It all boils down back to this. And this is the thing I love about Democrats today is that they blame Trump for all these issues, like the Democratic or the immigration policies that were passed back in '93 and then reaffirmed back in 2002. If we went from Clinton to the Bush administration, that these things were already passed. Trump just simply chose to enforce them. But it's already been shown on video time and time again that Obama wanted to enforce it, Hillary wanted to enforce it, Bush. But suddenly when Trump does enforce it, people are suddenly upset about it. It's like, you weren't upset for 13 years. You don't get to be upset about it now. You didn't care back then. You only care now because CNN tells you to care. CNN distorts the facts. They distort and they play off of this, oh, this mother's been separated from her child. Number one, we don't know if that's her child. But number two, we're neglecting the one fact that put her in this situation to begin with. You crossed illegally. And, I listen to Ben Shapiro's podcast, and I don't always agree with him, but he talked about that this immigration idea of stripping a child away from their family should not be used as a deterrent. I disagree. I sincerely disagree. Because as a law-abiding citizen, a legal citizen of America, if I commit a crime, I am going to be separated from my children while I go to prison. Now, it all depends on how you view that. If you view that as a deterrent not to commit a crime, so be it. But the fact still remains that parent put herself in that position. Right. Therefore, she's going to face the penalties, which is, prosecution, and then essentially, removal from the country. If we can't prove that child is hers, she shouldn't be allowed to have. But at the same time, it does bring up the point of, what do we do with that child if we can't prove that it belongs to that mother? What give it back to the government, Mexican government?
Right.
And then it goes into a human rights issue of, why are we being put in this position to begin with, and how much money are we spending on these issues that Mexico is forcing us to deal with? Mexico isn't doing crap. Mexico isn't doing a damn thing.
Yeah.
And there's an issue. There's a reason why people are fleeing Mexico, and they're going to continue to flee Mexico. So, to me, it's like, if you want to fix immigration, yes, by all means. But at the same time, we have to ask ourselves, why are people fleeing these countries? Why are people wanting to leave? Well, corrupt government, that's for one. But that falls upon the Mexican people to deal with on their own. But that's neither here nor there. But
yeah,
the fact of the matter is,
it's interesting to me that the cornerstone, and maybe you would disagree with my statement on this, but I believe that the cornerstone of what makes the United States of America the United States of America is the notion of individual responsibility.
Yeah.
And it's crazy.
Which I feel we've veered away from.
Oh, it's crazy to me that a nation built on that concept and that principle would then have a problem putting individual responsibility on people who are coming here illegally and creating this situation. Like, the pain in that irony is so great that it's definitely wedging between people, rightfully so, because there's people that think clearly and there's people that don't. And and you either find yourself on the right side of objectivity and truth, or you don't. It certainly doesn't mean that I understand everything perfectly or that you understand everything perfectly, but it certainly means there is a right and wrong. And when we've lost that, right? Like there actually is a right and wrong. So it's
I think the federal government has gotten so involved with these issues, though, that unwillingly, they have created what I call a safety net effect, to where right now, if I'm in the lower class income bracket, and I feel that, I just don't want to work, or I'm going to continue to go on welfare, I'm going to continue to do this, use all these government welfare is not something that you're supposed to stay permanently on. It's temporarily there to get you through what you need to get, because I've been on welfare before. When I first got out of the Army, I couldn't hold a job, or I couldn't find a job. But it was one of those things like, I don't want to stay on this, because number one, it's a shot to the ego. Where I'm from in Texas, a man provides for his family.
Yeah.
He doesn't go on welfare to do that unless he absolutely has to. And if you do, man, you don't talk about it. You don't talk about using food stamps. You don't talk about using WIC, which they're great programs to have. But unfortunately, it's been abused so much that right now people are permanently on welfare that do not need to be.
Yeah.
So with federal involvement in these subsidy programs, we've created a safety net effect. You look at abortion. You look at all these things that we make it legal to get an abortion. Well, what does that mean to those that are going to go out there and have sex? Well, hey, we can have unprotected sex, and if you get me pregnant, let's get an abortion. You're killing someone based upon your irresponsibility and the fact that you could have prevented it by practicing safe sex. But again, it comes back to that safety net that the federal government has provided them by saying, hey, if you screw up, we are going to catch you, and you will never have to atone for the responsibilities or the lack thereof that you have shown regarding your personal choices in life. So I think that's why I'm so against federal involvement at so many different levels, that we've created this welfare nation, and I hate it. I hate the fact that we have so many things out there of, as a taxpayer, take, for example, Obamacare, I'm going to help cover your health care costs? Hell no. It's not my responsibility. And I don't care what you think in regards to, show me where in the Constitution it says health care is a human right. It's not. Health care is privately practiced through doctors and private companies that want to do this at hospitals. That is what they choose to do. You can't tell that doctor what he's going to do. I disagree with it entirely. And I hate this fact that I have to be financially responsible for the lower class that doesn't want to work, or many of which don't want to work. And when they talk about taxation, when they talk about people, the distribution of wealth, do you think it's the upper class paying for this or suffering the most? Fuck no. They can afford it. Middle class cannot. So middle class is hit the hardest. So now upper class is like, okay, so now I got to downgrade my G6 to a G5 airplane. Sucks, but I can do it. Middle class is, I'm trying to be able to afford that 2-story house, this car I want, and to pursue my climb into the upper class. But if I have to sit there and have my coattails dragged on by the lower class, then it's not right. So this whole redistribution of wealth is essentially removing one aspect of why socialism doesn't work, and that's the inherent laziness that many human beings show when incentivization is no longer brought into the picture. And what I mean by that is, if the cliche example given is, if you and I are in a class together and you choose not to study for a test and I choose to study, we take the test, I score 100, you score a D, but the teacher says, hey, redistribution of that grade, it's going to be bumped up to C's across the board. The next test we take, do you think I'm going to study for it? Hell no. And you're not going to study for it. So now we both get C's or we both get D's. Now the standard of living went from a C to a D. Because inherently, if I know that no matter what I strive to do to be financially successful will always be countered by my having to provide for the lower class of the lazy that don't want to work, why the hell would I ever strive to make it to the upper class? And that is what socialism is. That's what redistribution of wealth is. And you look at Venezuela, you look at other places that have practiced. Show me one country where socialism has been successful. You can't. It doesn't exist. So democratic socialists today, like up in New York, they're going to run, are going to be the new face of the Democratic Party, and millennials are going to buy into it because they buy these buzzwords such as free and affordable health care or free college. There is no such thing as anything free. Someone is paying those teachers, someone's paying those doctors, and guess who it is? It's you and me. It's the middle and upper class. So while I hate that some people have to be in the lower class regarding financial and economy, I hate it, but at the same time, that's the American dream, to go out there and pursue greatness, to pursue whatever it is that you want. Is it always fair? Not necessarily, but that's just the way it is. I hate the fact that it's like that, but there is no such thing as a fair economy or a fair idea of, when I graduate high school, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go to college. Well, you better be able to afford it. If not, you better figure out a trade or you join the military. And people are just so dead set against, no, I should have the right to get my education for free. So who's paying those teachers? Who's paying those professors? Who's paying that college? That's where people get it all wrong. And that's why I do not like socialism. I do not like this federal idea of a safety net. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's only going to wean Americans more onto the government tit and make them less individuals and responsible for his or her own actions.
So when it comes to all federal agencies, we talk about ICE. What about FBI, DEA, ATF, et cetera, et cetera? All of the letters, all of the law enforcement agencies that exist at a federal level. Would you feel the same across the board about all of those in terms of handing those responsibilities over to the states?
Pretty much. I mean, if we have to take a case by case, you look at alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. What is their primarily purpose to serve as? And can it be done at the state level? Can any of these jobs be done at the state level? Or is there any benefit for a federal agency to be stood up? And I think you covered it before. It was basically to ensure that we are cross-communicating from state to state or agency to agency. If this agency isn't doing its job and serving its purpose, it needs to be done away with. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of employment. So for me, it falls back down to the states, where if a state wants to basically create that agency, it's up to the state. But my question is, though, why does the federal government have it? Like, what is the purpose? Why do we have, ATF? What's the purpose for this at the federal level?
Right. It's a great question to wrestle with. I don't even think most cops even ask themselves that question. Like, this is only a question even honestly that I really haven't even thought of much until the whole ICE thing has started coming up. Like, then I start thinking, I felt the same way. Like, I have no problem wanting to block illegal immigration or to root out those who are here illegally and get them out of here. And I have no problem with that. I certainly don't want people trafficked. There's all these human rights issues that supposedly ICE is involved with. I just think it can be done, again, more efficiently that's a good way to say it. Just more efficiently at least the state level, if not even an even smaller level within the state, to be able to function that way. And then it just got me to thinking, well, what if we just did that with everything? Why do we need the FBI? I guess on some level, I start thinking about, and that's not a knock on anybody that works for these agencies, because it's just like the TSA. I think the TSA is the absolute. TSA is the most absolutely asinine security enforcement organization that has ever been devised. But that's not a knock on people who work there and make a living and believe I'm going to go be a valuable member of society by having a job and doing something that I think may be productive. I don't think it is, but that's another tale to tell. Exactly. So it's not saying
it's not even really a knock. It's basically just saying we need to get back down to the fundamentals of what this country was founded upon. And you're right. Until I saw the stuff of being anti-ICE, I was like, what? And then it starts making you ask questions, because we've been indoctrinated for so long, because it's become normal to us. We just accept it, like, that's just the way it is. But we've never questioned it. But I think with a lot of stuff now, we are starting to question why these policies exist, why these agencies exist. And we have to separate it, like you just said, from the idea of we are not knocking the person working for them, but the reasoning behind why was this agency stood up, and does this coincide with what the Constitution represents? And if it does not, it needs to be stripped away. And we need to get back to what the founding fathers wanted for this country as far as state over federal. And I think, and there's nothing wrong with asking these questions. It's also making people understand, like, look, I don't hate ICE. I'm glad we have ICE. I just wish that it would be knocked down to the state level. Because, Texas knows what's best for Texas. California thinks they know what's best for California, but clearly they don't. But it's just the idea of the federal government needs to stay the hell out of everything. And I think that it begins with the understanding that politicians, both on the left and right, are so out of touch with the American people that they're wanting to pass these policies that have nothing to do with anything we need or want. And that's why we have Trump. Whether you like Trump or not, he is going after this thing in such a manner that most Americans love. He's trying to lower taxes. He's trying to renegotiate these tariffs. There's this trade war that we're getting into, which is a long time coming. He's trying to attack these policies that need to go away, that serve no purpose. And I love that General Mattis gets in there and he says, you in the military, we're going to do away with these stupid briefings that have nothing or no bearing on combat. And it's like, yes, go back to what we were designed for. But unfortunately, it just seems that we've gotten so bogged down in federal tape and federal this, federal that. It's like, Who gave you this power? Oh, the government did. Not the people, the government. But the people allowed them to have that power.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of times, unfortunately, when you start talking about people versus the government, you go into a lot of your state-run militias that are for a coup. Then you kind of, a lot of it's like, we can go about this through a democratic process of voting in leaders or voting in people that are running that say, this is what I want, this is what I believe in, and this is what I think we should stand for. But, I think we're hitting a new age, I don't know of enlightenment, but understanding what it is the Constitution represents, what the Constitution is for, what the Bill of Rights is for, the amendments, what they all represent, what they actually mean, versus just spitting it like many of these other social media influencers that I can't freaking stand, that go on Instagram or Facebook, and they sit there and they post pictures of their guns, like, it's my Second Amendment right, and you say, okay, what's the Second Amendment for? It's my right to own a firearm. No, it goes beyond that. What's your First Amendment? Oh, the freedom of speech. No, it's fivefold. What are the five parts of it? Well, it's, I could say what I was like. You don't understand what it is, the Constitution, what the amendments, what the Bill of Rights actually means. And then you get into more constitutionalist stuff of, like you just said before, you never question it because that's what we were taught. But then you start getting educated on these things like, wow, we've got it wrong, man. We have veered away from the Constitution. We veered away from what the Founding Fathers wanted for this country. And that's where people disagree on the whole separation of church and state, which I'm for. I don't believe that we should have, as a Christian, it should not be Christianity that guides the way this country is how we're governed. That's the Constitution. We were founded based upon the religious persecution of freedom of, but not having any singular religion guide us the way we should go, because then it violates the First Amendment right of freedom of religion. It says Congress shall make no law, dictating, basically playing favorites on an individual religion. So
right.
When people say that we should be founded on religion, like, no, I disagree. And it's not saying that I hate Christianity. It's like I reserve my right to practice my religion in regards to whatever it is I want to practice. But it should not be the rule of law across the country, because what if, say, for example, we progress as a Christian religion that suddenly says, hey, we're going to translate the text. Ultimately, you can't prove religion is real. You can't prove God is real. You can't prove it's faith-based. So we can't go by faith. We have to go by here and now, the tangible, the concrete versus the abstract thought. So if we were to go by a Christian belief, and this is where a lot of people don't like this, but if we got to go by a Judeo-Christian belief established back when Christ came on the scene, then you should never allow homosexuals to even exist in America, because it says it's a sin. We shouldn't be allowing of homosexual marriage, yet I support it, because I support your right, not the belief. So that's why I say church and state should be different. I can't sit there and say I, as a straight man, should be allowed to get married, but you, as a gay man, should not. That's where we differ on church and state, and that's why I think they should be kept separate.
Yeah, the everything that we've talked about all keeps coming back in my mind to that mutual exclusivity. You've got people today that aren't able to think critically and understand that you can believe two things at once, as long as they're not contradictory. And people want to push you into one or the other in a situation where, sometimes in life it's either A or B. But a lot of times when people are saying you have to pick A or B, there's a clear C, D, E, and F right in front of you that objectively can be articulated. In this case, like you're saying, you can believe one thing at a religious conviction level and believe also that someone else doesn't have to think exactly like you. So it's and
I think that's where a lot of us go wrong. We like you said it perfectly. We lump everything in as you have to see it one way. It's like, no, I can be a Christian but also believe in the Constitution, and I don't view it as me sinning or going against Christianity by saying homosexuals should have the right to get married. It's basically, it's your life to do with as you see fit. I am not your God. You don't answer to me, and I will never force my beliefs on you. But that comes with a two-way street. You can't force me to believe what you believe. And I hate this. I hate this that many in the LGBT now are trying to bully conservatives by saying, if you don't support us, you're a bigot. Well, I'll be real with you. I don't support the LGBT because, again, what kind of support am I providing?
Yeah.
I don't go out there and vote for their issues. I don't go out there and support their parades because, honestly, I just don't care. So to say that I support them is just lying to them. I don't support it, but here's the other thing. I don't care. It's your life to do with as you see fit. And if you want to love who you want to love, so be it. I am not your God. You don't answer to me, and I would never force my beliefs on you or attempt to bully you for the sake of believing the way I believe. And I think that tolerance goes two ways. And when you refuse to show it, then we have an issue. But I think a lot of it was spawned by militant Christians or militant religious people that say that, it's my religion or the highway.
Right.
And that's, again, what I say, the separation of church and state.
Yeah. So
But hey, brother, I got to get going.
All right,
I
man.
got this appointment at 30. I appreciate you having me on. I apologize if I talk too much. It's what I do when you get me spun up like that.
Yeah, it starts there, but I'll wrap it up with the chatters in here on the YouTubes. I appreciate you coming on, man. If you want to tell people where they can find you. I mean, I know pretty much everybody in here is going to know who you are, but
John Burke on Instagram. You can listen to the podcast at American Savage on iTunes and SoundCloud, and then John Burke on Facebook. You can find me all there.
All right. See you, man.
All right. Talk to you later, my man. Be safe.
Oh, let me bring this back. Here we go. All right. So I don't know what you guys are talking about. Obviously the focus for me at the start of the conversation was the idea of abolishing ICE, and I think that John starts there and weaves through a lot of related topics that I guess all prove the point of what about why people would either want to or not want to abolish ICE. I'm looking back at the super chats real quick before I talk any more. I may have missed some. Mike Wazowski is a legal immigrant. I despise those who came here illegally as well as those supporting it while berating the USA. They make legal immigrants look bad. I would agree with you on that, Mike, so thank you. Brett says, thanks for keeping it real. Hey, I appreciate that. James, there is also an issue with the states not following federal law as far as immigration goes. As it sits currently. Mitch, thank you so much for the $50 super chat. Bro child in the car should be careful how he uses the term lower class. Okay? Today's standards, lower class is roughly 30K or less, and TSA is worthless, and everyone who works there. Why we have these issues is because everyone has gotten soft. I don't share the opinion that everyone who works at TSA is worthless. I think the concept behind TSA is flawed, and I think that the running of TSA is flawed. I don't think that everyone who works at TSA is worthless. So I would agree and disagree. Everyone should watch In Search of Liberty. I will check that out. Let me see if I can also look down here into the super chats. Conservative Russian, thank you so much. He said, awesome show. Appreciate that. Trinoculus, been praying for you and your safety and wisdom as well as other Detroit cops, Christians. Please remember to pray for your local police. Wow, I'm humbled at that. Thank you so much. Kwaku and Moabin, would you recommend a Glock 17 or 19 as a duty weapon? The Chicago Police Academy only gives us these two options. Whatever one you shoot better with. Shoot them both. Whichever one feels better and you shoot better with, that's what I would go with. I carry a 17. That's what I learned to shoot on. For the longest time, I used a 19 to carry off-duty. They're both amazing weapons. Whichever one you feel most comfortable with is what you should use. Ronaldo, thank you so much. Ed W., I had two friends, and I mentioned that. Trinitarian, thanks for your work. And I think we're caught up on the Super Chats. So there we go. So to wrap up, because we've been going for longer than I anticipated. I didn't think he'd have that long. And so here we are. To bring it back to the specific topic of ICE, I agree. So when we think about... Here's what I reject. I reject that I can both despise illegal immigration and be compassionate for people. I can be empathetic and compassionate for those who are in dire circumstances that have been put upon them in a foreign country, and their desire to want to do anything and everything necessary to improve their life for their family. And for them in their mind, if that means they want to come to America, the United States of America, awesome. We have a process for that. You don't have to do it illegally. What's ironic to me, I brought up when I first brought John on, I brought up the lady climbing the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island. What's ironic about climbing the Statue of Liberty, bring your broken, you're tired, the idea of Ellis Island, people came there and began a legal process for becoming citizens. You don't see people sneaking through the Statue of Liberty to get into the country. They're sneaking in because that's the way that they're getting in. So there's a big difference. So there's a painful irony there that needs to be recognized. You shouldn't come here illegally. It's just that simple. It's a tax on our system. It's a spit in the face of our system. It's a spit in the face of the principles that make this country great. It's contrary to the principles that it was founded upon, and this idea that we are all immigrants. No, we're not all immigrants. Some of us are here. We're in the situation we are in now. This is the country we have right now, and we can respect the fact that people want to immigrate here and do it the right way. Maybe we need to change the right way. Maybe there's changes that need to be made to adapt to a modern environment right now and how we accept people into this country. However, to break the law to get here is not a good start. It's just simple. It's kind of like what you're willing to do is a demonstration of who you are. So if you're willing to break the law to get here, then you're willing to break the law to do other things here. That's how it can be looked upon. And I think it creates a whole bunch of situations, like a domino effect. Once you're here illegally, there's all sorts of problems that fall from that. I've seen countless times someone here illegally gets in a horrific car crash and causes injury to someone here. They don't have car insurance. They don't have a driver's license. Now what? Now what happens? My car insurance rates, it directly impacts my family's ability to thrive and to have a future, because financially my rates skyrocket even though I didn't have anything to do with it. It hurts everyone. So there is an impact. And then when it comes to the federal level of things, this is a question I'm contemplating myself. What's the purpose? We have to have some type of federal laws that kind of regulate the federal actions. But we have become bloated. We have become slow. We have become, I think, lazy on a national level in a lot of ways. And there needs to be some consideration for what kind of changes need to take place. So, any other questions? Guys, I don't know how the quality of this turned out. I'll have to listen back. I'm not sure I'm going to keep this up because it's just my camera, my audio should be great. This is a good microphone. My video though is low quality. The Skype quality was low. I'm not sure I'm going to keep it up just for that reason. I may make another video on this topic later. This was just to be able to deliver the live stream to you guys and make it worth it. So I'm not sure. I'll take a look and see if it's something. The way that the screen was, again, I had a horrible technological day trying to make this happen, but we did it because I said I'd be here. The other guy's name was Mike. Did the gays do 9/11? That's a stupid question. The other guy is John Burke. He's a combat veteran. He was on a show. I didn't even ask him what it was called, American Grit or True Grit, with John Cena, and host of the podcast American Savage. John Burke 1 on Instagram. He's a social media lightning pole, very polarizing personality, and so I figured he's married to a police officer. He's fought for the country, has strong opinions, and seemed like a good person to bring on to ask about abolishing ICE, because he was talking about wanting to abolish the ATF. So I thought, oh, okay, maybe he's got something to say about ICE as well. That's why I asked him on. All right. Well, that'll be it for me. I'm going to end the stream, and I'm going to go make some dinner and try to get rid of this headache from a long, painful day of technical problems. All right, guys. Thanks so much for all the super chats. Thanks for listening in. You're seeing the beginnings of what is going to be a regular show. I'll open it up with, random stuff from around the web related to policing, and kind of have some social commentary. Bring on guests, that kind of stuff. I'm working on it, playing with it. I'm growing and learning as a creator, and you guys are along for the ride. So thanks a lot.